Good afternoon, everybody. Do you remember a few days ago when Maxime Bernier and Vasi Kapolis got into it on Twitter? And I said, I'm not sure if this is over. I'll be watching for replies. There's another reply, so I'll update that story. But first, we're going to do a Maxime Bernier Twitter roundup. But come and join CanadaPoly.com. CanadaPoly.com is a private forum. That means you have to register to see it. Once you register, you'll have access to all of our conversations. We'd love to have you join us. See you in the forums. Okay, so Maxime Bernier is tweeting and he says, quote, "Of course I agree that world government is not going to happen anytime soon at Coyne, but that's not the point. The point is we have a prime minister who believes in this goal and takes decisions accordingly. Is he compromising Canada's interest in pursuit of this utopian globalist goal?" And two, he says, also, there are more and more supposedly, quote, non-binding agreements, such as the Paris Accord and the Migration Compact, that are having a direct impact on policymaking in Canada. My concern is that this growing globalism is impacting us now, not in 200 years. And he's linking to this article here. Link is in the description if you want to read it for yourself. Mr. Coyne outs himself as a globalist in this article, really. And I'm just going to read you the highlighted parts, but he says, he highlights an aspect of the UNPA. So this whole article is about the United Nations parliamentary agreement, right? Making a direct elected parliament and then giving the United Nations teeth to enforce those rules, right? That's the goal of the UNPA. And you can read the website, and this is what Mr. Coyne has outlined here. You can read it all here. The link is here, and the link is in the description as well. Mr. Bernier has highlighted this before. Sorry, it's Assembly. The A is the Assembly. So, and there are huge problems with this. One of them being that Canada has a very small population and a very large landmass. And if we are all of a sudden governed by a one world population that says, well, we should probably mine all of that oil from Alberta and give it to whoever needs it or whatever, that's going to be problematic, and we're not going to have much of a say because we have like 0.5% of the world's population. It's very small. We have a very small population on the world stage. Britain has almost twice our population, right? We're at 37. They're at 67, I think, roundabouts, right? 67 million people. We're at 37 million people, some change, right? So the UNPA says the only way to pass some sovereignty upward without sacrificing accountability is direct democratic elections. And he says could, may, long run, uncertain conditions. In other words, never. The only way this could ever happen would be if all the world's governments agreed it should. And even then, it would likely be about as toothless as, well, think of how little power the European Parliament has, then dilute it by about 100. But someone said it on a website, so you never know. The European Parliament is making Brexit an absolute nightmare for the United Kingdom right now. They've been trying to leave since Canada elected Justin Trudeau, right? Like right after that, Brexit happened, and then right after that, Trump happened. So it is an interesting, you really think that the United Nations having teeth and an direct elected representation and everybody agreeing, oh yeah, we should hand over our sovereignty to the UN. Do you think they won't use it? Look at what they did with the non-binding Paris Accord and the non-binding Global Compact for Migration, right? Like, come on, wake up, Mr. Coyne. You carry on, and I scroll down. It says, cue the hysteria, courtesy of Maxime Bernier, leader of the increasingly nutty People's Party of Canada, which means, on current form, the Conservatives will be asking about it in Parliament next. Quote, our Prime Minister supports a campaign for the establishment of a world parliament that could impose binding laws and regulations on Canada, Bernier said in a Thursday tweet, one of several posted before and since. Quote, this is not a conspiracy theory invented by paranoid anti-globalist, he explained in another. Then, just to underline the non-conspiratorial, non-paranoid nature of his argument, he hit the caps lock key. Quote, is he loyal to Canada or loyal to a future world government that will destroy Canada? I've covered this, and that's accurate. And here's where Mr. Coyne outs himself as a globalist. He says he's highlighting the this is not a conspiracy theory invented by paranoid anti-globalists. The campaign for a UN parliamentary assembly is an international network that includes influential supporters of global governance everywhere. Okay, so that's the tweet he's linking to. And he says, of course, just because something is never going to happen doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It's hard to call it fear-mongering when there isn't even a decent fear to monger. Some of the most perplexing problems facing modern societies, climate change, financial market regulation, the refugee crisis, to go with the enduring challenges of avoiding war and keeping markets open transcend national borders. The more globalized we become, in fact, thanks to advancements in communication and transportation, the more global our approach has to be. And so that's Mr. Coyne saying, yeah, what's wrong with handing over our sovereignty? And this is Mr. Bernier. This was Andrew Coyne's tweet to his own article, my bad. Mr. Bernier finishing off, he says, and by the way, glad you could corroborate everything I wrote about this UNPA campaign to establish a world parliament with the power to adopt binding regulations, as well as Trudeau's support of it by simply checking the sources. See how easy it is at Vassikopolis? And again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Ms. Kopoulos. I could be wrong on how to pronounce it. But this is all to the same article that we just looked at. So I think it's interesting that the UNPA is being downplayed by the media. Again, like, this is non-binding. This is this is a conspiracy theory. It's totally never going to happen. Don't even worry about it. Well, what happens if 7 countries or 10 countries or Europe, all of the European and Northern African countries sign on UN, just like with the Global Compact on Migration, about 15 countries bowed out, but all of a sudden that's non-binding kind of binding, right? So it seems like this fake, don't worry about it, everything's fine, is not actually what we should be saying, and instead we should just read the headline, Mr. Coyne, and welcome our world parliament overlords, right? I reject that, sir. I believe in Canadian sovereignty and Canada directing Canada's future, not even an elected world government, because in an elected world government, Canada loses. We lose clout, we lose say, we lose ability to direct our own ship. So moving on to Maxime's, the rest of his tweet stream this morning. He started tweeting about Bill C-46, and Bill C-46 is the adjustments to impaired driving to cover marijuana laws. And here's Maxime's tweets on that. C-46 is a horrendous attack on our right to live free from arbitrary harassment by the state. Despite the constant BS about tolerance and diversity, the Trudeau government is eroding our basic freedoms one by one. Time for a reset in October 2019. Freedom and responsibility. And National Post article talking about how Canadians need to be prepared for breathalyzers 2 hours after getting home, potentially. There's lots and lots of terrible, terrible stuff on the roadways now. And so all of these people are getting breathalyzers. Wow, wild. And whereas before you weren't allowed to be breathalyzed unless there was an indication that you may have needed to be breathalyzed, now they can just request a breathalyzer under the law. So no need for proof of criminality, no need for evidence of breaking the law. They're assuming you're guilty until you can prove you're innocent, and hence a giant lineup and waiting to be breathalyzed, right? Terrible. Back to Maxime Bernier. Quote, it may sound unbelievable, but Canada's revised laws on impaired driving could see police demand breath samples in bars, restaurants, or even at home. And if you say no, you could be arrested, face a criminal record, or ordered to pay a fine and subjected to a driving suspension. And this is to a Global News article. And we're not going to go through each article because he's referring to the same Global News article, and the link will be in the description. We're not going to look at it. He's quoting directly from the article. Okay, this one says, quote, you could be in violation of the impaired driving laws even 2 hours after you've been driving. Now the onus is on drivers to prove they weren't impaired when they were on the road. In the Liberal police state, we are now guilty until proven innocent. Quote, under the new law, police officers no longer need to have a reasonable suspicion the driver has consumed alcohol. Now, an officer can demand a sample from drivers for any reason at any time, equals Liberal police state. Quote, while criminal lawyers predict the new law will be challenged, likely through appeal courts and even to the Supreme Court of Canada, they expect that the process will take several years. In the meantime, they say drivers are vulnerable to unfair arrests and prosecution. And I was saying this about driving with marijuana. They have a get out of jail free card. They can test your blood. And if you say you are a daily marijuana smoker, regardless of your medical status, if you have a prescription or not, in every province but Ontario, if they take your blood and your THC levels are higher than a very low standard, and I believe it's 5 milligrams per 100 milliliters of blood, they don't have to prove your impairment while you're driving. They can just say you have enough in your system to affect whatever, and you're going to be arrested and given impaired driving consequences, which is wild. And so this is the same law, Bill C-40, 45 or 46, whichever one he said at the beginning. I can't remember at this point in time. But it's insane. It's insane. And people will be caught up in unfair arrests and prosecutions until this is struck down by the Supreme Court, if it does get struck down by the Supreme Court. And I've heard people saying that they've lost faith in the Supreme Court recently because of because of just some bad decisions, but I'm not going to get into that. Maxime Bernier again, the Liberal police state, quote, Canadians could now face criminal charges for driving with illegal amounts of alcohol in their system, even if they were stone cold sober while behind the wheel under tough new impaired driving laws, according to criminal defense lawyers. And this is a link to CBC news article now, a different one. And quote, Liberal police state, police no longer need to have any reasonable grounds to suspect you're impaired or driving with a blood alcohol concentration of more than 0.08 before demanding you submit to testing. Refusing the test can result in a criminal charge. And again, the same CBC article linked. And again, Bernier says the Liberal police state, previously, if drivers could prove they weren't yet over the legal limit when they were stopped by police, a court could find them innocent. The new law removes that defense. And again, CBC news article link. And Bernier again says guilty until proven innocent in the liberal police state. The charge is considered a reverse onus. In legal terms, police don't have to prove your blood alcohol content was over the limit when you were driving 2 hours early. It's now up to you to prove you were sober. And the last one, instead of being tougher with real drunk drivers, this law will create a whole new category of false criminals. It's based on the same stupid logic as our gun laws that harass law-abiding gun owners instead of cracking down on real criminals. And again, the same CBC article. So that's an interesting tweet stream, an interesting combative Bernier coming out and talking to, silly laws that Trudeau's enacting. Bill C-40, let's see, which one is it? 45, 46, 46. And people who are trying to, again, downplay major potential shifts in foreign policy and governance, right? So why the nothing to see here, Andrew Coyne? I, for one, do not welcome our one world parliament overlords. So there you go. Disagreement, democracy in action. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, as I said. As I said, we'd love to have you, and have a wonderful evening.